Officer Hayes had run this play 100 times. A lone black woman on a deserted highway, no witnesses, no backup, just him and a badge. He expected pushback, then surrender. Tonight felt routine, until it wasn't. He saw a civilian driver. He didn't see a U.S. Army colonel. Older, seasoned, trained to command under pressure. He didn't know her calm came from deployments, not privilege, and his control game was already failing. When he reached for power that never belonged to him, he didn't just pick the wrong person, he lit a fuse under his own career. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe. The sun laid gold across the empty lanes as Colonel Tasha Monroe guided her SUV home. She'd just left a veterans ceremony, still carrying that quiet pride you wear after honoring people who endured. She wore civilian clothes, charcoal blazer, crisp white blouse, tailored slacks. Her uniform sat folded in a garment bag on the passenger seat, ribbons and insignia tucked away like private history, not a prop. In the rearview mirror, red and blue lights surged closer. Her brow tightened. No speeding, no swerving, no broken law. Yet the cruiser stayed on her bumper, insisting. With a slow exhale, she pulled over. Gravel crunched under heavy boots. The officer approached broad-shouldered, posture stiff, badge catching the last light. When he reached her window, Tasha recognized the look. Condescension dressed up as authority. "License and registration," he snapped. She moved deliberately, handed over her license. "Is there an issue, officer?" His eyes skimmed her face and hands like he was hunting for a mistake to punish. "Step out of the vehicle!" The command wasn't curiosity. It was a dare. Tasha kept her voice level. "Why am I being stopped? I'm within my lane. What's the reason?" His smirk said, "Enough." "Suspicious activity. Step out now." She'd seen this script, knew the danger of escalating alone on a dark shoulder. She exited calmly, hands visible. He circled her SUV, peering inside like it belonged to him. "Where you headed?" "Home," she answered. "I left a military event." His eyes narrowed. "Military, huh? And what are you claiming to be?" She lifted her chin. "Colonel Tasha Monroe, U.S. Army." Silence. Then a scoff, slow and cruel. "Oh, really? Colonel?" He drew the word out like a joke. "You sure about that?" Tasha didn't blink. "Yes." He leaned in, enjoying the moment. "Where's your military ID, Colonel?" She checked her blazer pocket. Nothing. Then her wallet. Still nothing. A flicker crossed her face, not fear, but calculation. She knew exactly why it wasn't there. She changed before the ceremony. Her ID was in her uniform pocket, secured at her base locker. She met his gaze. "I don't have it on me." He cut her off, smirk widening. "How convenient." He tapped her license like a gavel. No veteran status either. Funny, right? A whole colonel with no proof. Tasha stayed composed. "Run my name. Your system will confirm." He chuckled, refusing. "I'll check more than your name," he said, stepping toward her door. Tasha turned sharply. "You don't have probable cause to search my vehicle?" His grin deepened. "Suspicious behavior is enough." His tone dripped with contempt. "And you're acting real nervous, ma'am." She wasn't nervous. She was contained. Men like him mistook discipline for guilt. Tasha weighed her choices and chose patience, not surrender. "As I said," she repeated evenly, "I'm Colonel Monroe. My ID is in my uniform at my base locker." Hayes whistled, mocking. "So I'm supposed to take your word?" She didn't rise to it. He flipped her license lazily. "I don't see Colonel anywhere. No rank, no veteran marker, nothing. He clicked his tongue. A real soldier would make sure folks knew. She held steady. This wasn't about credentials. It was about control, about his need to shrink her. Your department has databases, she said. Run my name. Hayes smiled. I could. I don't feel like it. Old-fashioned, he added, enjoying the power. So here's what we'll do. Step out. Tasha's eyes hardened. I already complied by stopping. You're escalating for no lawful reason? He feigned patience. Ma'am, don't make this harder. Tasha didn't move. I'm not stepping out again without a lawful reason. His smirk vanished, replaced by something colder. You're refusing an officer's order. I'm refusing an unlawful request, she corrected, voice measured. You have no probable cause, no reason to detain me. Hayes sighed theatrically, tapping his belt like he was bored, like consequences were optional. This is where it gets messy, he said. Refusing a lawful command sounds like resisting. Tasha tilted her head slightly. You wouldn't be threatening arrest, would you? He leaned in, voice low and sharp. I'm saying it never ends well, he warned. And between you and me, I don't think you're special enough for exceptions. Tasha recognized the tactic. Bait the reaction, manufacture the justification. She didn't give him what he wanted. I know my rights, Officer Hayes. Either arrest me or let me go. The air tightened. He'd expected fear, compliance, trembling. Her calm irritated him like a spotlight. His hand hovered near his radio. Jaw clenched, he stepped closer. Have it your way. Tasha remained still. You're under arrest, he said, waiting for panic. She gave him nothing but steady eyes. Annoyance flashed. He grabbed his radio. Dispatch, possible 1029, send backup. Nakadasat. The smugness in his voice was deliberate. He was building a narrative before checking facts, before following protocol. Tasha exhaled slowly. You're making a mistake. Hayes clipped the radio back, smirking. Last I checked, refusing law enforcement is a mistake. He nodded toward her SUV. Step aside. She didn't move. You still have no probable cause. Hayes leaned closer like he was offering mercy. And yet I'm searching it anyway, her jaw tightened. That's an illegal search. He shrugged. If there's nothing, you've got nothing to worry about. Then he yanked open her door and leaned inside. Tasha clenched her fists, staying controlled. Reacting would feed his story. Exactly what he wanted. He tossed papers onto the seat, rifled through compartments with reckless intent. Running a little business out of here, Colonel, he muttered. Smuggling? Stolen military property? Tasha's voice stayed even. You're crossing a line. He barely looked up. Lady, I don't see a line. He threw open the passenger door, dumped items from her purse, scattered personal pieces of her life like trash. Tasha slid her phone into her palm, discreet and calm. She knew who to call. Turning slightly away, she tapped a contact and lifted it to her ear. Colonel Monroe, she said smoothly, I need help. Now. Hayes kept tearing through her belongings, not noticing the game shift. His frustration grew with every empty pocket. He wanted proof she was lying. Instead, he found nothing, and nothing makes a bully angrier. He slammed a door and stalked toward her. Where is it? Tasha blinked. Where is what? He gestured at the mess. Fake credentials. Drugs. Something. Even he heard how ridiculous he sounded. You think this is funny? He snapped, voice sharpening. You think acting calm means, I'll let this go? Tasha's expression stayed unreadable. Are you finished? He scoffed. We're just getting started. He hit his radio hard. Dispatch, request K9 for a full sweep, possible narcotics. The radio crackled back, unexpected. Unit 13, hold all action. Urgent call from command. Patch through immediately. Hayes frowned. Command! He hadn't called anyone above his supervisor. He switched channels. Officer Hayes, go ahead. Silence. Then a voice, razor-sharp and furious, cut through like a blade. Officer Hayes, Captain Mercer, what the hell are you doing? Hayes stiffened. His mouth opened, then shut. The captain didn't let him breathe. You're unlawfully detaining Colonel Tasha Monroe. She's a decorated officer. You will cease immediately. Stand down. Escort her to the station for a formal apology. Now. Hayes swallowed hard, fingers twitching on the radio. Shame burned under his skin. Sir, You what? Mercer snapped. Ignored protocol? Illegally searched her vehicle? Harassed a senior officer because you felt entitled? Tasha stood calm, posture unshaken. Hayes's blood boiled. Mercer's voice returned colder. Get in your cruiser, drive her to the station, then report to my office. Pray you still have a badge by sunset. The line died. Hayes stood frozen, humiliated in silence. Tasha stepped forward, steady as stone. Are you finished? She asked again. Hayes clenched his jaw until it ached. He had no choice. He stomped to his patrol car and yanked the door open. Get in, he ground out without looking at her. Tasha turned to her SUV first, calmly collecting her scattered belongings, placing everything back with deliberate order. Then she walked to the cruiser with measured pace. She slid into the back seat, not as a suspect, but as the person holding control. Hayes slammed his door, white-knuckled the wheel, and accelerated hard, tires biting the pavement. Tasha's voice stayed calm. Drive safe, officer. Hayes tasted blood where he'd bitten his cheek. The ride to the station was silent, except for engine hum and the tension he couldn't swallow. Her composure felt like a verdict. In the lot, Hayes braked and jumped out stiffly. Tasha followed at her own pace. Inside, the atmosphere changed instantly. Whispers, sidelong looks, officers avoiding his eyes. The building already knew. The desk sergeant pressed the intercom. She's here. Seconds later, the chief emerged. Chief Nolan Pierce, gray at the temples, jaw set, eyes sharp. He assessed the scene in one cold glance. Colonel Monroe, Pierce said, clipped but respectful. Then he turned to Hayes. My office. Now! Hayes hesitated a fraction, enough to earn a warning look, then marched past Tasha like pride could save him. Inside, the door shut with a hard click. Hayes stood rigid. Tasha sat, crossing one leg, posture composed. Pierce's stare pinned Hayes first. Explain why detaining a U.S. Army colonel made sense to you. Hayes tried to justify it. She refused to comply. No military ID, no veteran status on her license. How was I supposed to know? Pierce's eyes hardened. Run the name. Follow protocol. Do your job. Pierce leaned forward. Instead, you harassed her like a rookie with a power trip. Hayes's fists tightened. Tasha watched, silent, not needing to argue. The facts were louder than his excuses. Pierce's voice dropped. Do you know the mess I'm cleaning? The Pentagon called. The Pentagon! Hayes went still, humiliation settling deeper. Pierce turned to Tasha. Colonel, I offer a formal apology. Tasha nodded once, accepting, not excusing. I expect procedural changes so this never happens again. Pierce answered immediately. Understood. Then he faced Hayes, voice like steel. Apologize, now! Hayes froze, jaw twitching. He turned to her slowly. I apologize. Tasha tilted her head. For what? The question forced specificity. Pierce cut in sharply. Try again. Hayes swallowed, throat bobbing. I apologize for my actions, he said through clenched teeth. I was wrong. The words sounded poisonous to him. It won't happen again. Tasha studied him, seeing the apology without the meaning. Pierce exhaled hard. Effective immediately, Officer Hayes. You're suspended pending review. Hayes flinched. If it were solely my call, you'd lose your badge tonight. The threat hung heavy and real. Tasha stood, smoothing her blazer. Thank you for your cooperation, Chief. Hayes muttered under his breath, eyes bitter. You set me up. Tasha raised an eyebrow. I didn't have to. Pierce snapped at Hayes. Not another word. Hayes shut his mouth, but the look he wore promised resentment. Tasha recognized it instantly. Humiliation that doesn't learn. Humiliation that hunts. The next morning, Tasha slid into her SUV, breathing slow as dawn stretched shadows over the road. The world looked calm, but she'd learned long ago that calm can be camouflage for trouble approaching fast. She wasn't tense, but she wasn't soft. Years in uniform taught her one truth. Men who rely on power don't accept losing. Some take the lesson and move on. Others let it rot into obsession. Hayes had lost authority, control, the ability to intimidate without consequence. That kind of loss eats certain men alive. Tasha remembered his clenched jaw, the twitching hands, the rage he tried to hide. He wasn't sorry, only furious he'd been stopped. She considered changing routes for a heartbeat, then dismissed it. Altering her life to satisfy his need for dominance would hand him victory. She refused. So she drove the same way, eyes open, posture relaxed, mind alert. The highway was mostly empty, only a few early commuters and trucks. The tire's steady hum filled the quiet like a metronome. Then she saw a dark sedan in her rearview mirror. It had blended into traffic before, but now it closed distance with purpose. She didn't react outwardly, no sudden braking, no panic, just attention. The sedan lingered in a way normal drivers didn't. No pass, no lane change, no natural rhythm. It hovered at her blind spot like a shadow trying to stay unseen. Her fingers flexed, not fear, assessment. Without warning, the sedan surged forward, sharp, aggressive, intentional. Her body braced before her mind finished naming the threat. Instinct, honed under real danger, aligned perfectly with what she was seeing. She glanced to the side mirror and caught the driver's face. Hayes, out of uniform, features twisted with raw rage, hands strangling the wheel. No badge now, no veneer, just a man deciding control was his. He edged closer, pressing into her space, trying to push her towards the shoulder, box her in, force a mistake. Tasha didn't slam brakes or jerk the wheel. She refused to give him panic as a weapon. She let her SUV drift slightly, just enough to sell the illusion she was reacting. Hayes took the bait! When he lunged for position, she flicked her signal, a small move meant to mislead him into overcommitting. He rushed the gap, trying to trap her. That was his error. At the last second, she cut hard the opposite direction, breaking his line. His tires screamed as he overcorrected, frustration twisting his face tighter. Hayes regrouped and attacked again, more erratic now, veering with reckless determination. The chase carried them off the last busy exits into emptier stretches where trees replaced signs and witnesses vanished with distance. Tasha recognized the trap as the road grew barren. Hayes wanted isolation. He slowed and drifted center, forcing a standoff. She eased down smoothly, breathing even, hands steady, letting the moment arrive on her terms. The highway narrowed into a remote curve, shadows long across pavement. No cars, no help, just space and intention. Tasha stopped with control. Hayes slammed into park so hard the tires squealed like a warning. His door flew open and he stormed out, rage spilling into every step. "You think you're clever?" he shouted. "You think you won?" Tasha watched him like a problem already solved, calm sharpening the silence. She stepped out with deliberate ease, closing her door quietly. "If I remember," she said, voice measured, "you're the one who chased me." Hayes laughed without humor. "I call it fixing a mistake." "What mistake?" she asked. His teeth clenched. "Letting you walk away like you humiliated me." Tasha's gaze stayed steady. "You did that yourself." His expression twisted uglier, pride curdling into threat. "People like you don't get to challenge authority," he hissed. "You think a phone call makes you better?" Tasha answered evenly. "Following the law makes me better than you." His nostrils flared, chest heaving. "You think I needed a badge?" he snarled. Tasha studied him. "It was the only thing keeping you from a real mistake. Now it's gone and you're spiraling." His bitter laugh carried no warmth. He paced closer, shaking with anger. "I've heard them whisper. I've watched them judge me." He pointed at her, hand trembling. "You sit there acting untouchable." Tasha didn't flinch. "This isn't a game." "You lost because you were wrong," she said. "Instead of owning it, you blame me." Hayes stepped in, voice sharp. "You played victim." Tasha's eyes stayed flat. "If I got what I wanted, you'd be gone." For a second, realization flickered in him. Then pride smothered it. "You don't decide how this ends," he growled. Tasha squared her shoulders. "You do. Get in your car and leave before you can't." Hayes's breathing turned uneven, hands curling into fists. He vibrated with the unbearable weight of his failure. "That's not how this goes," he muttered. Tasha sighed softly. "Then you're as predictable as I thought." His temper snapped. Hayes lunged, swinging hard, sloppy with rage instead of skill. Tasha read him before the first punch finished traveling. She sidestepped cleanly, letting his momentum carry him past her. She could have ended it immediately. One precise strike, one controlled takedown. But this wasn't only about stopping him. He needed to understand what losing felt like without excuses, without the shield of a badge. Hayes came again, wilder, aiming for her jaw. Tasha ducked, shifted, and drove an elbow into his ribs with sharp precision. He grunted, stumbling, pain flashing across his face. Then anger surged hotter. "You think you're superior?" he snarled, spinning toward her like an animal cornered. Tasha didn't answer. She didn't need to. His desperation told the story. He charged, lowering his stance for a tackle. He tried to use weight and momentum to crush her. Tasha waited a heartbeat, then pivoted, hooking her foot behind his leg and turning his force against him. Hayes hit the pavement hard, breath knocked clean out. Disoriented, he stared as if the road had betrayed him. Tasha stepped back, not retreating, just giving him space to choose. She could have pinned him. Instead, she watched, letting his pride drag him forward again. He pushed up, face twisted between rage and disbelief. "Are you finished?" Tasha asked, calm as steel. The words cut deeper than a punch. Hayes refused the message. He lunged again, feinting left, swinging right. Smarter, but still too slow. Tasha caught his wrist mid-swing and twisted with efficient force. Pain shot up his arm, dropping him to a knee before he understood how he got there. She leaned closer, voice low. "You don't know when to quit," she said. Hayes snarled and reached with his free hand, still fighting. Tasha exhaled, done letting him drive. She yanked his trapped arm forward and swept his leg out. He crashed again, harder! His head bounced, vision blurring. Tasha stepped back, watching the dawning realization creep in. He was losing, and no amount of fury could reverse physics or training. Silence held them. Only his harsh breathing and the wind through trees. Tasha didn't rush him. She knew his type. He'd rather destroy himself than admit defeat. And right on schedule, he forced himself up again. Blood hit the pavement when he spat. Exhaustion shook his limbs, but pride kept him upright. "Stay down, Hayes," Tasha warned, voice level. He ignored it, fists trembling, lunging with what he had left. He swung wild, pouring everything into one desperate attempt. This time he clipped her ribs. Pain flared sharp. Then another hit grazed her jaw, snapping her head slightly. He mistook that for momentum. He was wrong. Tasha had been hit in fights that decided who lived. 2 punches didn't scare her. They clarified the task. She stepped aside, cutting an angle. When he surged forward, she slipped behind him and locked an arm to his throat. She yanked him backward into a hard choke, legs braced. Leverage perfect! Hayes clawed at her forearm, bucking, panic rising, as air vanished. Tasha's voice stayed calm. "It's over! You're done!" He thrashed, feet scraping, nails digging. She tightened, controlled, refusing to loosen for theatrics. His movement slowed, then faltered. Pride can't breathe for you. His struggle turned to ragged, shallow gasps. His legs went still. The last of his fight drained out in tremors. And finally, the sound she'd been waiting for. "Surrender." His voice broke into a whisper. "Please." Tasha didn't move, letting the failure settle fully. "What was that?" she asked. Not cruel. Final. Hayes whimpered, humiliation cracking him open. "Please, let me go." She held a few seconds longer, then released and shoved him forward. He collapsed, coughing violently. Hayes lay gasping, shaking, eyes wide with something new, fear of what he'd become. Tasha stood, breathing controlled, ignoring the ache in her ribs and jaw. "You did this to yourself," she said, quietly. "You could have walked away," she continued. "You chose this." Hayes swallowed, throat raw, shoulders slumped. For a moment he looked small, defeated by his own decisions. Then something shifted again, darker. His breathing steadied too quickly, fingers curled against the pavement. Before she could reposition, he sprang up and bolted toward his sedan. He wasn't regrouping, he was running, trying to salvage an illusion of control. Tasha's eyes narrowed. Not on her watch. She launched after him, closing distance fast. Hayes ran on adrenaline and denial, stumbling slightly with each step. Tasha moved with disciplined endurance, a shadow gaining ground. He reached for the driver's door, fingers clawing the handle. Tasha cut in and slammed her palm against the door, forcing it shut. Before he turned, she drove a precise elbow into his ribs. His breath exploded out. He folded against the car, pain bending him. Tasha stayed close, controlling angles, refusing to let him climb back into danger. Hayes tried to twist away, but his body betrayed him. Slow, drained, still shaking. He coughed hard, one hand gripping the roof for support. The road remained empty, trees watching like silent witnesses. Tasha's voice stayed steady. "It's finished, Hayes. Don't add another mistake you can't erase." Hayes glared up, hatred flickering behind panic. He looked like a man choosing between shame and violence, and shame was winning. He staggered, eyes darting, calculating escape routes that didn't exist anymore. Tasha shifted her stance, protecting her injured side, still composed. She didn't gloat. She didn't taunt. She simply stood there, proof that his intimidation never worked on her and never would. Hayes's shoulders sagged, anger draining into exhaustion. The morning air felt louder now. Wind, distant birds, his ragged breath. He looked at her like she'd stolen something from him, when he'd thrown it away himself. Tasha kept her distance, alert for sudden moves. She'd seen desperation flip fast. Hayes swallowed, then winced, ribs protesting. He glanced at his car again, the door still shut. His escape still blocked by reality. He shifted his weight as if he might lunge once more. Tasha's eyes locked on his hands, reading every twitch. Hayes hesitated, finally understanding that another charge would end worse than the last. The ache in Tasha's jaw pulsed, but her voice stayed clear. "You can stop," she said. "Right now." Hayes stared, breathing uneven, pride still clawing for a story where he wasn't the villain. He opened his mouth, then closed it, words failing him. For the first time, he looked less angry and more lost, like the truth had finally reached him. The silence stretched, heavy as judgment on an empty road. Tasha didn't move closer. She didn't need to. Control wasn't about domination. It was about restraint. Hayes's eyes flicked away, shame crawling across his face in real time, replacing rage with something brittle. He shifted again, then stopped, as if his body finally agreed with what his mind had avoided. He couldn't win here. Not with strength, not with intimidation, not with fury. All he had left was the aftermath. Tasha watched him carefully, making no assumptions. Men like Hayes could pivot from collapse to violence in a heartbeat, but he didn't. He simply stood there, breathing, cornered by consequences he'd chosen. Hayes's hands dropped to his sides, fingers still trembling. His gaze bounced between her face and the open road. He looked like a man searching for an exit inside his own head, realizing there wasn't one. Tasha's shoulders stayed squared despite the pain. She spoke softly, controlled. "This was never about me." Hayes flinched at that because he knew it was true. His obsession had always been about his own loss. He coughed again, bending slightly. The sound was uglier than anger, raw and human. Tasha didn't soften into pity, but her tone stayed steady, refusing to become what he'd tried to paint her as. Hayes glanced down, then back up, eyes wet with rage he couldn't sustain. He looked at the bruises he'd earned and seemed stunned they belonged to him. Reality can be brutal when it stops negotiating. Tasha took one slow step to recenter her balance, careful of her ribs. Hayes tensed, expecting another strike. None came. She simply stood there, letting him face the only opponent he couldn't bully. Truth. He darted his gaze toward the driver's door again, then away like temptation. But his legs didn't move. His breath slowed, resignation settling in. The fight had ended. What remained was the reckoning. Tasha remained poised, scanning the empty highway for any approaching vehicle, any witness, any variable. Hayes' sedan sat silent, a useless promise of escape. The trees held their shadows like curtains around a stage. Hayes finally straightened, wincing, and looked at her with something like defeat. Tasha's voice stayed firm. "You're done." The words weren't a threat. They were a conclusion, delivered with military calm. Hayes reached for his door handle again, but Tasha was faster, palm slamming the door shut with authority. She drove her elbow into his ribs with precise force, stopping his escape before it started, ending the moment right there. His body, already battered, gave out as Officer Grant Hayes sagged against the sedan. His knees dipped, then caught on the hood. Colonel Tasha Monroe stepped in, blocking him, her SUV angled tight behind. No escape. Hayes gulped air, pressing his back to the car like metal could hide him. His fist curled weakly, knuckles swollen and shaking. Tasha rolled her shoulders, calm and centered, her stare promising he couldn't change the ending. You done running?" she asked, voice steady. Hayes swallowed hard, throat bobbing, breath thin. He leaned on the vehicle for support. His silence answered. Tasha exhaled once, measured, and held control without raising it. There was no triumph left for him, no surprise reversal. Tasha stepped closer, forcing him tighter against the hood. "You could have walked away," she said. "You could have taken the loss. But you don't release control." Hayes twitched like he wanted to argue, to justify, to manufacture a defense. Nothing came. Tasha studied him, reading every shift of weight, every nervous flex. Even exhausted, he was still searching for a last opening. She sighed, seeing the thought form. "Don't!" she warned. His muscles tightened anyway. Hayes lunged. One final gamble. Tasha moved first, sidestepping, catching his arm, twisting sharply, and driving him face first onto his hood. Hayes grunted, cheek pressed to warm metal, arms pinned under her grip. Tasha leaned in, voice low and flat. "You lost, Hayes. It's over." He cursed into the paint. But the fight was gone. She held him there long enough for reality to settle. No fantasies, no loopholes, no bravado. Then she released. Hayes slumped, forehead against the hood, shoulders heaving unevenly, defeat radiating off him like heat. Tasha stepped back and rolled her wrist, shaking out tension. Her ribs still ached from earlier hits, jaw tight from the clip he landed. Compared to his collapse, it felt minor. She watched him stay folded. "You should have known better," she said, calm and controlled. "Men like you think power is permission, intimidation, abuse, submission on demand. Maybe you got away with it before." Her tone dropped. "That ends today." Hayes didn't answer. He just stayed bent over the hood, broken and humiliated, breath ragged. The last scraps of denial slid off him. The road was quiet again, except for the uneven rhythm of his lungs. The fight drained everything from him, leaving only consequences heavy as an anchor. Tasha let the moment stretch, just long enough to cement it, then reached into her pocket and drew out her phone with practiced calm. Her fingers moved smoothly as she dialed. "Colonel Tasha Monroe," she said, crisp and professional, 47 years old and unshaken. "Dispatch officers to my location. Reporting assault and attempted vehicular homicide. Suspect, detained, non-compliant." Hayes stiffened at those words. Just a flinch, a jaw clench, the last illusion collapsing. Tasha ignored him and continued, precise and clear, leaving no room for misunderstanding, no room for anyone to soften what happened. "Yes," she added, voice steady. "The suspect is a police officer, Grant Hayes. Yes, that Hayes. I'll provide a full statement on arrival. Come prepared." She ended the call and pocketed the phone deliberately. Hayes pressed his knuckles into the hood, harder, breathing faster. Panic replaced humiliation. "Wait," he croaked, voice rough with desperation. Tasha tilted her head slightly, expression unreadable, as if weighing whether he deserved air. "Anything, please," Hayes rasped, glancing at her from the corner of his eye. "You don't have to do this. You already won." Tasha exhaled, unimpressed. "And what do you think happens next?" He had nothing. She stepped closer, voice lowered. "You chased me, tried to run me off the road, put hands on me. You escalated until this was the only end available." Hayes shook his head, breath stuttering. "You don't have—" "No," Tasha cut in, firm. "You don't get to beg now." The words landed like poison in slow motion. Hayes had believed he could rewrite the story, reclaim control, erase the station humiliation by force. Instead, he sealed ruin. Distant sirens rose through the still morning, a wail cutting the quiet. Hayes's hands twitched, then went still. Tasha watched the last resistance drain from him. He wasn't just beaten, he was finished. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue reflections danced across his car as 3 cruisers pulled onto the empty stretch. Doors opened fast. Tasha stepped back, hands relaxed at her sides, making the scene unmistakably clear. She didn't need speeches. The damage told its own story. A sergeant, Victor Lane, early 50s with sharp eyes, strode forward, recognition flickering. "Colonel Monroe," he greeted, professional and alert. Dispatch said it was serious. "It is," Tasha said. She gestured to Hayes, still folded over the hood, eyes burning with helpless rage. "He attacked me, tried to force me off the highway, pursued with clear intent to harm. I defended myself, detained him. He's yours." Lane's gaze hardened. He turned to his officers. "Cuff him." 2 stepped in, grabbed Hayes's arms, twisted them behind his back, and snapped steel onto wrists with a sharp click. Hayes winced, but didn't resist. They hauled him upright. Without the uniform, without the swagger, Hayes looked smaller, compressed by consequences. Lane shook his head slightly. "Grant Hayes," he murmured, bitter. "You really wrecked your life, didn't you?" Hayes stayed silent. As they guided him towards the cruiser, Hayes lifted his head and locked eyes with Tasha, one last time. Hate was still there, but now it shared space with fear. Tasha held his stare, unblinking as if closing a door. "You did this to yourself," she said simply. The back door slammed. The cruiser rolled away, taking Hayes with it. Tasha released a controlled breath as the remaining officers gathered statements and confirmed what happened. She gave them everything, clean, detailed, professional. No gaps, no ambiguity, no soft corners for defense attorneys to exploit. Hayes wasn't slipping through procedural cracks. Sergeant Lane listened, nodding, writing, asking only what mattered. When it was done, Lane looked at her with a quiet acknowledgement. "You okay?" he asked, more respect than question. Tasha nodded once. "I will be." She turned toward her SUV, the weight finally loosening. Hayes thought it was about domination. He never understood the truth. He lost before he ever chose the battlefield. Now he'd spend years paying for that misunderstanding. And Tasha had no intention of letting the system tuck him away quietly. She refused to let him vanish into internal paperwork. Men who turn authority into a weapon often find cover: friends, unions, silence. Tasha had seen that machine. She would break it with the same discipline she used in command. After giving her formal statement at the station, she watched the polite faces, the careful language, the "we'll look into it." She knew how it worked. Hayes had connections. Somewhere, someone would try to reshape the narrative. Tasha pulled out her phone and made 2 calls that mattered. The first was to her attorney, Dana Whitfield, 52, relentless, and meticulous. The second was to a journalist she trusted, Marisa Kent, early 40s, fair, unafraid. With Whitfield, Tasha filed charges: assault, attempted vehicular homicide, reckless endangerment, and any additional counts supported by evidence. She insisted the case be airtight, built so no department, union, or favor could dilute it. She documented everything: injuries, road conditions, timelines. She provided dashcam footage from her SUV, ensuring the truth lived on video, not rumor. If Hayes tried to spin himself as victim, the footage would crush him on contact. Then she spoke to Kent, carefully and on record. Not theatrics, facts. Tasha understood pressure. Public light keeps institutions honest when internal shadows don't. If this story stayed private, it could be buried like others. When the report hit, it moved fast. Headline after headline. Officer accused of targeting U.S. Army colonel. Attempted road assault under investigation. Department faces questions. The city didn't blink. It stared straight at the rot. And the deeper reporters dug, the worse it got. Hayes had a history: complaints of profiling, intimidation, excessive force. Cases minimized, paperwork lost, reviews softened. What once lived in whispers now lived on screens. Internal affairs moved quickly, not from virtue, but from pressure. Officers who once laughed with Hayes now scrambled to distance themselves. Suddenly, they remembered things. Suddenly, they wanted to cooperate. Tasha watched the fear motivate honesty. Hayes was suspended indefinitely while investigations stacked. Tasha didn't celebrate. This wasn't victory confetti. It was accountability, late, necessary, and overdue. She knew public attention fades, so she kept the timeline moving. With charges filed and evidence secured, she tracked every procedural step. The department's statements turned careful and stiff. Their tone said one thing: they wanted it to go away. Tasha made sure it couldn't. By week's end, termination paperwork landed. Official, final. By month's end, the court date was set. Tasha exhaled once when she heard, not in joy, but relief. Consequences were finally catching up to the man chasing power. Still, she understood how men like Hayes resurface, disgraced here, hired elsewhere, records overlooked, history rebranded as misunderstanding. She'd seen the shuffle before, not this time. She planned the next strike carefully. Tasha filed a civil lawsuit aimed at permanent consequences: financial, reputational, professional. Her bruised ribs and swollen jaw documented harm. Her damaged vehicle documented intent. The suit wasn't about money. It was about sealing doors. No security firm, no agency, no contractor would risk employing a man with her lawsuit trailing him like a warning flare. If he tried to claw back authority through a loophole, the civil judgment would be waiting, ugly and impossible to ignore. The community exploded. Debate lines formed instantly. Some called her a hero who refused to be hunted quietly. Others twisted themselves into excuses for Hayes. Tasha didn't argue with strangers. She let evidence and charges do the speaking. Online predictable slogans appeared. She should have complied. He was doing his job. Media hates cops. Some even blamed her for surviving. Tasha had walked through war zones. Comment sections didn't scare her. Noise wasn't power. She refused interviews designed for spectacle. She didn't trade discipline for sound bites. The facts were brutal and simple. Hayes followed her, tried to run her off the road, attacked her, and lost when stripped of the badge's protection. And no amount of ideology could rewrite what cameras recorded. His name sank. His career ended. With the lawsuit in motion, his finances bled. The system that once buffered him now distanced itself for survival. Tasha returned to her life and work with the same steady routine, refusing to let chaos claim her schedule. She wasn't chasing applause. She was making sure a predator couldn't wear authority again, anywhere, under any title. Weeks later, the criminal case advanced. Hayes' defense attempted spin, stress, misunderstanding, mutual escalation. It didn't stick. The footage contradicted them. His prior complaints contradicted them. The timeline contradicted them. As pressure mounted, the department released formal statements about policy review and community trust. Tasha heard the subtext, damage control. She responded through Whitfield with clear demands, no quiet settlements, no sealed outcomes. The city kept watching. Once attention locks onto a story like this, everyone becomes careful. Politicians, unions, supervisors. Tasha used that, not with rage, but with precision, like planning an operation with zero room for error. Then the trial date arrived, heavy with inevitability. The courthouse packed, press, locals, veterans, officers. Tasha walked in composed, blazer crisp, posture straight, control in motion. Across the room, Hayes sat rigid beside counsel. His expression tried for defiance, but it looked thin, like paint over cracks. He still believed he could talk his way out, blame his instincts, suggest she overreacted. Tasha didn't look at him long. He wasn't the mission anymore. The prosecution opened with facts, not theater. Then the dashcam video played. Every escalation, every reckless swerve, the roadside confrontation, the attempted runoff. The courtroom went quiet in the way people do when truth removes choices. Witnesses followed, officers, dispatch records, internal affairs documents. Some spoke with embarrassment, admitting protocol failures. Others sounded angry, finally free to say what they'd been swallowing for years. Hayes' posture tightened with each detail. When Hayes' history surfaced, complaints, patterns, dismissed reports, the air grew heavier. It wasn't one incident. It was a habit. The jury watched him like they were seeing the real man under the badge for the first time. Then Tasha was called. She rose without hesitation and took the stand, calm and deliberate. Hayes stared at her, searching for weakness like it was oxygen. He found none. Tasha's composure made his anger look childish. The prosecutor, Ada Patrick Sloan, late 40s, asked, "Colonel Monroe, describe the morning." Tasha inhaled slowly. "I was driving my usual route when I was stopped without cause. I complied. The officer escalated immediately." "How did you know it wasn't routine?" Sloan asked. Tasha answered cleanly. "I requested the reason. He couldn't provide one. He doubted my identity, mocked my rank, demanded compliance without lawful basis, and threatened arrest." Sloan paced, letting the jury absorb it. "Did you feel targeted?" Tasha's eyes stayed steady. "Yes. He treated me like a suspect from first sight. This wasn't enforcement. It was control, punishment for not shrinking." Hayes shifted at the defense table, jaw flexing. Tasha continued, unbothered. "When intimidation failed, he called for backup, then illegally searched my vehicle, tossing belongings, looking for anything to justify what he'd already decided." Sloan asked, "And later?" Tasha's voice remained level. "He followed me in a personal vehicle. He attempted to force me off the highway. The courtroom murmured. Sloan pressed. To harm you? To kill me. Hayes' attorney objected, but the video backed her. Sloan asked about the fight. Tasha didn't dramatize. I gave him chances to leave. He refused. He wasn't fighting for safety. He was fighting for dominance. Sloan's final question landed softly. What did he do when he couldn't win? Tasha turned her head, looked directly at Hayes for the first time and said, He ran. The word struck harder than any accusation. Sloan ended, No further questions. Tasha stepped down, movements measured. She didn't glance back at Hayes. The truth had already hit the room. Every attempt at spin now sounded like desperation against recorded reality. Days passed with more testimony. Experts on vehicle impact patterns, dispatch supervisors on protocol, internal affairs on complaint history. Piece by piece, Hayes' image dissolved. The jury didn't see a wronged cop. They saw a threat. When closing arguments finished, Hayes sat rigid, refusing to show fear. But his eyes kept blinking too fast, like his mind couldn't outrun what he'd done. The judge called for order. The jury left to deliberate. They returned faster than anyone expected. The four persons stood, hands steady, voice clear. A. Guilty. One count, then the next. Guilty again. The word repeated like a hammer. Hayes' shoulders dipped as if gravity doubled. The judge, Harold Whitaker, early 60s, allowed a defendant's statement before sentencing. The room shifted with anticipation. This was Hayes' last window for remorse, the last chance to show he understood your harm. Hayes stood slowly, suit tugged straight, posture stiff. He scanned the courtroom, jury, press, spectators, and began, I was doing my job. The line hung there, pathetic and thin, like he expected it to protect him. He doubled down, voice hardening. People don't know what it's like out there. Every stop could be deadly. You expect hesitation? You expect second-guessing? He glanced at Tasha briefly, then back at the judge, still defiant. The courtroom didn't soften. It tightened. Hayes' words weren't remorse. They were justification. The judge listened without expression, letting Hayes dig deeper, letting the record capture exactly who he remained, even after conviction. Judge Whitaker finally spoke, calm and surgical. You claim duty. The evidence shows abuse. He paused. You pursued Colonel Monroe not because she was dangerous, but because she refused to submit the way you demanded. The judge continued, voice firm. You weaponized authority. You escalated from a baseless stop to reckless pursuit and violence. You targeted her identity, her composure, her refusal to be diminished. That is not policing. That is predation. A ripple moved through the gallery. Hayes stood frozen, lips pressed tight. The judge's gaze sharpened. You've shown no remorse, no accountability. Given the severity and pattern, the court will impose a maximum sentence. Hayes inhaled sharply, fingers gripping the table edge, as if it could steady him. Tasha watched without celebration, only certainty. Consequences weren't vengeance. They were the system finally doing its job. Mr. Hayes, Judge Whitaker said, you are sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for attempted vehicular homicide, aggravated assault, and abuse of power under color of law. The number fell like a slab of concrete. The gavel cracked. Hayes' face went blank, like his mind couldn't translate the finality. 15 years echoed in his head louder than whispers, louder than cameras clicking. There was no appeal to pride now, only time. bailiffs moved in immediately, efficient and emotionless. They took his arms. Hayes turned his head slowly toward Tasha, searching her face for something. Triumph, pity, rage. She offered none. She simply met his gaze, steady. What looked back at him wasn't satisfaction. It was closure. Hayes's lips parted as if to speak, but no words mattered anymore. The bailiffs guided him toward the exit, cuffs visible, shoulders hunched under the weight of lost identity. As Hayes disappeared through the doors, the courtroom noise blurred. Tasha rose, inhaling deeply. Months of pressure loosened in her chest. Accountability had landed, not with applause, but with inevitability. Outside, cameras waited, questions thrown like darts. Tasha didn't stop. She didn't owe sound bites. She walked down the courthouse steps with military calm, letting the verdict speak. Justice didn't need a microphone to be real. Hayes sat later in a sterile holding cell, bench cold against his spine. The silence felt alive, closing in. The trial sounds replayed, the gavel, the verdicts, the judge's words. None of it felt real until solitude forced it. For years, Hayes believed men like him didn't truly fall. Complaints vanished, supervisors covered, transfers happened. He expected protection. Now he stared at gray walls, realizing the system only shields you until it decides you're poison. His resentment surged, hot, useless. If Monroe had just complied, he told himself, none of this. If she had shrunk the way he expected, he'd still be someone. But the thought collapsed under one fact. He chose every step. He curled his fingers into his jumpsuit fabric, nails digging, trying to find control in cloth. The truth kept returning. Arrogance drove him. Superiority guided him. And the moment he escalated beyond the badge, he exposed himself. Hayes finally understood what powerless meant, not as theory, but as a locked door and a set schedule. He had nothing left to manipulate, no narrative to rewrite, no audience to intimidate, only consequences waiting, patient and permanent. Across town, Tasha stood on the courthouse steps, letting herself take one slow breath of relief. Not joy, release. This had never been about one day on a highway. It was about a pattern finally stopped. Hayes's badge had once been armor. Now it was evidence. His name became shorthand for disgrace. Still, Tasha knew backlash would come, supporters twisting truth, claiming witch hunt, demanding redemption for a man who never apologized. She didn't care. People who refuse facts don't get a vote in reality. What mattered was the system, for once, doing what it was supposed to do. Hayes had every chance to show remorse. He chose defiance instead. Tasha returned to duty with quiet focus. She didn't build speeches about it. She worked. But she stayed sharper, more aware of how quickly power rots when unchecked. She'd won a battle, not ended the war. In the weeks after sentencing, the Pentagon issued a formal commendation, recognizing her composure, restraint, and professionalism. Her leadership quietly resonated across the military community. Tasha accepted it without pride, only acknowledgement. Commanders reached out, offering respect. Veterans wrote letters. Strangers thanked her for refusing to be hunted quietly. Tasha read some, filed others away, and kept moving. Recognition wasn't the mission. Preventing repeat harm was. Meanwhile, Hayes's name stayed in headlines, then slowly shifted into cautionary tale. No department would touch him. No security firm wanted him. His record was a permanent stain. The network that once protected him now pretended he never existed. Hayes sat in his cell, replaying every choice, searching for a different ending that didn't exist. He hated Tasha for surviving him, but hatred didn't change calendars. Time marched forward, indifferent, and he would feel each day of it. Tasha sat at her desk on base, mission reports stacked neatly, the hum of duty outside her door. Life didn't pause for courtroom drama, but she carried the lesson. Authority without accountability becomes a weapon faster than people admit. She looked out the window at morning light over the installation and exhaled slowly. The case was closed, the verdict final. Hayes would never wear power again. She didn't need celebration. She needed certainty, and she had it. Justice, she understood, isn't clean. It's paperwork, persistence, and refusing silence. She'd done what needed doing, then returned to her role without grand speeches. Some battles are loud. The real victories are quiet. Weeks later, community discussions flared and faded, but policy changes remained. Stricter stop documentation, expanded dashcam requirements, complaint transparency. Departments hate sunlight, yet they adapt when forced. Tasha's case became the forcing function. And Hayes? He became a warning label. Every time a rookie officer heard his name, they heard what happens when you mistake fear for respect, authority for entitlement, and control for law. That was the real deterrent. On a crisp afternoon, Tasha drove past the same stretch of highway. She didn't flinch. She didn't reroute. She simply kept steady hands on the wheel, eyes forward, owning her space. Trauma doesn't get to redesign her life. The road looked ordinary again. Trees, pavement, sky. But she remembered how quickly ordinary can turn. She'd survived because she stayed disciplined, not because she got lucky. That difference mattered, and she wouldn't forget it. Back at base, younger soldiers asked about the headlines. Tasha kept her answers short. Document everything. Stay calm. Know your rights. Don't surrender dignity to someone else's ego. Practical guidance, not mythology. She understood why people wanted a hero narrative. Stories make chaos feel manageable, but she didn't want to be a symbol. She wanted fewer victims. If her experience taught caution and courage, that was enough. Months passed. Hayes' appeals failed. His civil judgment held. The door to authority stayed locked. Tasha didn't watch his downfall for entertainment. She simply ensured the lock stayed secure, because systems sometimes forget. She also ensured Marisa Kent's reporting stayed fact-based and thorough. No sensational edits, no cheap drama. Truth is more powerful when it doesn't exaggerate. The public responded hardest to what was undeniable. Tasha never chased recognition, but it found her anyway. Veteran groups invited her to speak. She declined most. For the few she accepted, she talked about discipline, de-escalation, and accountability. Not revenge, not rage. Her attorney, Dana Whitfield, later called with final confirmations, restitution schedules, civil enforcement, employment blocking disclosures. Tasha listened, thanked her, and ended the call. Loose ends tied. The machine couldn't quietly unwind this. Whitfield's last words were simple. He can't come back from this. Tasha replied, good. Not from cruelty, from necessity. A man willing to hunt. People with a badge doesn't deserve another route back to power. The city eventually found new headlines, new arguments, new distractions. But some changes stayed planted in policy and memory. Hayes' name remained a marker in training rooms. What happens when ego drives a cruiser? Tasha returned fully to her career path, promotions and responsibilities moving forward like they always had. She refused to let one man's obsession define her timeline. He tried to steal her peace, He failed. Hayes, in contrast, lived inside a schedule he didn't control. Counts, meals, lights out. He discovered the truth he hated. Power is temporary, accountability is patient, and the world keeps turning even when you're stuck. Sometimes, late at night, he replayed the highway, the hood, the cuffs. He tried to convince himself he was the victim. But the footage existed. The verdict existed. His cell existed. Reality didn't negotiate with his pride. Tasha didn't check on him. She didn't need updates. Justice wasn't a hobby. It was a line drawn and enforced. She focused on training, leadership, and the next mission, because discipline is what carried her through everything. When people asked how she stayed so calm, she gave the truth. Calm is a choice you practice. Fear happens. Anger happens. But control is trained. And trained control beats untrained rage every time. The Pentagon's final internal note summarized it plainly. She acted with restraint, reported properly, preserved evidence, and protected herself without escalating beyond necessity. That was the difference between chaos and consequence. In her office, Tasha filed the last of the documents into a locked cabinet, then closed it with a soft click. The sound felt symbolic. An ending. She looked up at the sunlit base and allowed herself one quiet breath. Hayes once believed the badge made him untouchable. He learned too late that the law doesn't belong to him. It belongs to everyone. The moment he tried to own it, it owned him instead. Tasha understood the larger truth. Justice isn't automatic. It's demanded, documented, and defended. She had done all three. And now, for the first time in a long time, the road ahead felt open again. If you enjoyed this story, share it and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I've picked 2 more stories you'll probably like, waiting for you right now so you can keep the momentum going. Have a great day. Calm is not weakness, it's trained power. For those of you in your late 60s or 70s, you've lived long enough to know that panic almost never helps. You've driven lonely stretches of highway, seen red and blue lights in the mirror, and felt your heart kick a little faster. Colonel Tasha Monroe felt that too, but she met it with something many of you have practiced your whole lives. Steady, earned calm. When Officer Hayes mocked her rank, doubted her identity, and tried to bait her into fear, she didn't shout, flail, or beg. She did what a lot of older Americans do when trouble shows up. She kept her voice level, chose her words carefully, and let discipline do the talking. In that moment, her calm wasn't the absence of fear. It was the result of years of learning when to stand firm and when to wait. That kind of control is a quiet superpower, especially in a world that rewards loud anger and instant reactions. Documentation is how ordinary people make systems listen. Many of you remember the days when complaints disappeared, when speaking up felt pointless because nobody wrote anything down and nobody followed through. Tasha knew better. After the highway and the second ambush, she didn't just say, "That was wrong," and go home. She documented her injuries, saved her dashcam footage, called a lawyer who understood the system, and spoke to a reporter who cared about facts, not headlines. She filed criminal charges and a civil lawsuit, not out of revenge, but to make sure Hayes could never slip quietly into another uniform in another town. For older Americans who have watched paperwork bury the truth, this is a powerful reminder. Records, timestamps, videos, and written statements are not busy work. They are our shield. When you insist on documentation, you force the system to stop looking away. Tasha didn't win because she shouted the loudest. She won because she left a trail no one could erase. The legacy of accountability outlives the bad actor. If you're 65 or older, you're probably thinking less about what you can get away with and more about what you leave behind. Tasha understood that too. Hayes went to prison, yes, but the story didn't end with a sentence number. Policies changed. Traffic stops had to be recorded. Complaints were tracked, data was reviewed, and rookies learned his name as a warning, not a badge of honor. Her case became part of the training, part of the culture, a reminder that authority without accountability eventually destroys itself. That's the legacy piece. Many of you marched, voted, raised kids, and worked long hours so your grandchildren could grow up in a slightly safer America. Tasha's fight fits right into that long chain of effort. She didn't ask to be a symbol, but her refusal to be hunted quietly made roads a little safer for the next driver, the next veteran, the next young person who refuses to shrink. For older Americans, the lesson is simple and profound. Every time you stand up, document the truth, and demand real consequences, you're writing one more line in the story future generations will inherit. Friends, after hearing Colonel Monroe's story and the hard lessons it carries, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever faced a moment when someone in authority tried to intimidate you and you had to stay calm, stand your ground, or insist on your rights? If you were in Tasha's shoes on that quiet highway, what do you think you would have done differently? Or the same? Share your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a like if it resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next story and the wisdom it brings.